Good morning, everyone. Thank you for all attending. My name is Stephen Dyke. I am the CEO of TEKConn. We are an IT support and consulting firm here in New York City with offices in Stamford, Connecticut, as well as Livingston, New Jersey. Today, we're doing our cybersecurity webinar. We do one each quarter. And today's topic is Don't Fall For It, Tax Scams in 2021, What Every Business Owner Needs to Know. If you have any questions, you can send them in, and we'll definitely get to them towards the end of the presentation. But I'll definitely jump right into the agenda and the webinar for today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about specific things that are hitting during tax season, mainly around phishing and spear phishing scams. We're going to look at some of the trends in hacker activity in 2020 and 2021. We're going to briefly cover how hackers conduct a spear phishing attack, so you have an understanding of how that works. We're going to look at the identifying characteristics of phishing scams, specific examples of tax season spear phishing, and then obviously what measures you can do and implement to help prevent falling victim to these types of scams. So just so we're on the same page, just kind of want to define what phishing is. It's a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information by impersonating oneself as a trustworthy entity in a digital communication. Phishing is nothing new. It's been around since pretty much the start of commercially used email. Very early days, it was just kind of broad phishing. These were broad automated attacks. They're very unsophisticated. Those are old enough to know. You might have seen those, something like, help, I'm trapped in Colombia. Can you wire me some money? Or I am a Nigerian prince and I am trying to fund some of our freedom fighters. Can you help us in our quest? So again, they were pretty easy to spot. They were not very plausible and not very effective. But over the years, the hackers have got very sophisticated. So now they're really going at spear phishing is what they're really using as their vehicle now, and it's a very customized attack on specific employee in a company. They do a lot of research up front. They'll go into LinkedIn. They will go on your website. They will make calls into your organization to try to garner as much information as they possibly can to target specific people, usually at the executive level, because they know that the executives are the people that have the access to the most important information. So that's very, very, very common now as we're going into spear phishing instead of just kind of general phishing. And if you look at some of the statistics from 2020 and some of the trends, 1 in 8 employees share information on a phishing site. 85% of all organizations have been hit by some kind of phishing attack. 97% of users are unable to recognize the sophisticated email with phishing. So again, they are really getting good at how they present this information. They're looking for that 1 in 8 because they only need 1 in 8 to get into your network or launch an attack. So again, they're getting very smart on how they're doing it. There was a survey done, and on average, a single spear phishing attack resulted in an average loss of $1.6 million. Obviously, that depends on the size of your organization, the type of data that you have, and the revenue that you generate and funds. But on average, this is a very, very lucrative mode for hackers to get money, and they're continuing to do it, and they're doing it at an exponential rate. Obviously, the numbers of sophisticated incidents reported, phishing incidents reported by the FBI nearly doubled from 2019 to 2020. So this is working, and they're making a lot of money on it. So we would only expect that these types of attacks are going to continue. So if we look at how hackers execute phishing attacks, now, mind you, 99% of all email that's out there is actually spam. And the majority of it gets blocked by the variety of different spam solutions out there. And I'm sure your organization has one type or another, hopefully. But it's a cat and mouse game. So again, the hackers have a lot of resources at their disposal. They are figuring out new ways to bypass the spam filtering products. The spam filtering products in return block their sending sites. They'll block their content. And it's a back and forth. So regardless of what vendor you use for your spam filtering, eventually something's going to get through to your inbox. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to compromise a user, obviously, by getting to that inbox. And they're looking generally for 3 different things. The first thing is they're looking to trick you into making payments to false accounts, maybe an ACH transfer, maybe a credit card, but that's a quick hit for them. They can get money really quick, or they could use that to extort money down the road. The second way is they're looking at you to click on something to deliver malware or some kind of virus that's going to give them access to the network and the accounts in your organization. And they will use that at a later date to launch a more sophisticated attack. They'll either steal information out of your databases, or they will lock up your company assets with crypto locker attacks. So basically, you can't use anything, all your data is locked up, and you have to pay some kind of ransomware to recover that data from them. Very, very popular. Again, exponentially growing over the last few years. You'll see a lot of the news stories, and they really don't care about the size of the organization anymore. And I hear that a lot. Companies will say, well, we're not that big, or we're not really high profile. Well, they're doing this on a mass scale. It's very sophisticated, but it's also being done on a mass scale. So again, they're looking at anybody. They're doing the research. If they think you're a decent candidate to get some money out of, they're going to go after you. And when they're doing that second one, you click on something, generally what will happen is the user clicks on something and nothing happens. They say, oh, you would expect maybe your monitor might start smoking, or your system freezes up or something, but it's really not the way it works. Generally, if you click on something or enter information short of maybe a credit card, they're gonna wait, and they're gonna maybe launch these attacks at a future date, sometimes weeks, many times months later. Again, that is their step-off point. So just because you click on something and nothing happens doesn't mean it's over. It's actually generally the beginning of something. And then the third thing they're usually looking for is if they get that sensitive information, whether it's social security information or passwords or your credit card information, they're going to sell that on the dark web to other hackers. So there's a whole marketplace on the internet where hackers will actually collect all this information and sell it to other hackers. Again, a very lucrative market, something that's been prolific in the last 4 or 5 years for sure. And again, something that we would typically see as a motivator for these folks to actually get into your systems and trick you via these phishing campaigns. So that's the scary part. It happens, it's out there, and those who are attending, it's great. I'm glad you're attending this webinar, because we're going to kind of go over how to spot these phishing attacks in a more effective manner so you don't fall victim yourself or people at your firm. So if we're looking at a phishing email, there's usually three key components to look for. And this will really help you spot and take pause before you start clicking on things. But the pattern is generally these 3 things. It comes from a trusted authority. And it's usually a government entity, maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's a coworker, your boss, somebody that you would typically perceive as somebody you trust. A Nigerian prince, obviously, you've never heard of, you're probably going to be suspect of that. But if it appears it's coming from somebody you're going to lower your guard. So again, it's going to bring your suspect's thoughts about that email down. Then they're going to create a sense of urgency. We want you to act irrationally is what the hackers are thinking. We want you to act quickly. We don't want you to think. We want you to click. We want your information, and we need it quickly. So we're going to create some kind of urgent item in that email. And you want to react to that because you want to avoid some kind of negative consequence. And we'll have some examples. We'll talk about that. And then we're requesting some kind of sensitive information. Obviously, that's the third part. Key part of that is we're going to ask for data. I already gave you a couple examples there, but we're going to use that data, obviously, to sell, or we're going to use it for future attacks on your network. So those are the 3 things that you're looking for. And again, that's a quick pattern. If it all lines up like a slot machine, you should know, all right, I shouldn't do anything with this email until I really kind of research it a little bit more thoroughly. So these are a couple common tax season scams that we've seen. These are actual, I'm going to give you some examples of some real life emails that have come in, but this is a very common one. Usually, will come from a government agency, the IRS, or maybe state tax franchise board. But know this up front: the IRS generally doesn't send emails in this nature. They usually will send kind of notices of lack of payment or penalties via mail or certified mail. They do send some informational emails out to folks, but generally, anything that requires, some kind of fee or penalty generally won't be done by email. So that's usually something you want to look out for. But in this case, it's the IRS. They're saying, hey, look, you have forgotten to make a payment, or you're being investigated for something, and if you don't act quickly, there's going to be these massive fines. They'll sometimes be so brazen to say that we're going to come arrest you immediately. Obviously, the IRS doesn't arrest people. They might have another agency to be part of that, but they're not going to come there that afternoon. I've seen it where they say, we're going to come this afternoon to arrest you if you don't do this now. So again, that's a trigger, but you're trying to avoid some sense of urgency around the heavy fines or arrest. And then obviously, how do I fix this? How do I get out of this? Okay, I'm going to process payment immediately. So you're going to click on there and put in your credit card information or ACH information, or they might even ask you to set up an account. So they're going to get your name and password that you might be using for other websites and assets in your organization. So that's a pretty common one that's been out for a few years. Another very common tax season scam is software vendors. In this particular case, I have Intuit, so TurboTax, QuickBooks, obviously very popular products. You probably might have an account with them. They'll do it for most of the popular accounting products. So if you have Sage or NetSuite, you're going to, I've seen them with those as well. But again, it's something that you might trust as, okay, I have an account with them. They're sending me some information. They make them look really good. This one, they'll say something like, hey, your account's been hacked. Obviously, sense of urgency around that. It's pretty critical. How do I fix this? Okay, I'll click here, and I'm going to update my password immediately. So again, the idea behind that is they probably know that you have QuickBooks, or they're guessing it, and once you give out your username and your account, then they have access to that same software that you have. So that's a very popular one. You'll see that year in, year out. And again, they're getting very smart about trying to do as much research as they can. They'll even call up acting as a sales rep from one of these companies just to verify that that's the program you're using before they send one of these attacks. So again, be aware of those. And then again, a third example, very, very common, is some kind of trusted authority. This particular case is the CEO. These are targeted typically at HR or finance departments. And their sense of urgency is, I have some time-sensitive project I'm working on with somebody, and the ask is, I need this W-2 information. So if you're in the finance department or the HR department, and the CEO of the company you work for is asking for somebody or asking for something, you're gonna want to jump on that. You want to make sure that you don't look bad. So you have the sense of urgency, and you're going to want to send something off as soon as possible. And I've seen examples over the years of these. I'll give you one real example of this particular scam. I had a user at one of our clients call up one day, and she said, "Look, I'm working on this thing for the CEO, and I need to send something over to him, but the email system is preventing me from sending it. And can you help me out with it because it's not sending?" Well, it's a very heavily regulated organization that she's working for. So there's a lot of controls in place about the type of data that can be sent out and the size of the files. So I started talking with her, and I said, well, what's this project you're working on? And sure enough, she said, I need to send out all the W-2s to the CEO. And having known what the scam is, I said, well, let's take a look at this here really quick. And in actuality, sure enough, this was not the CEO that wrote her. It was a fake email. We traced it back to an email address, I think in Jordan, So obviously, this company's based in New York, and she was getting ready to send the W-2 information for all 1,200 employees. And had the system not blocked her from doing that, she would have executed on that. So again, knowledge of these things and picking up on those three patterns: trusted authority, sense of urgency, asking for sensitive information, that really causes you to, you should be stopping and not acting on that until you do a little bit more research. So that's kind of the three main kind of categories you want to look for. But let's get an example of an email here where this is, again, a pretty good example of something. And I'm not going to go over all this content, but I'm going to highlight this email, and we take a little bit closer look at it. And on the surface, okay, if you kind of glance at it, and most people don't read in great detail when they see an email, okay, it looks like it's coming from the IRS. That's somebody I know, and if I'm especially in the finance or HR department, it's something I'm going to be aware of. And okay, what's this all about? Oh, geez, fraudulent tax filing. Okay, well now there's a sense of urgency behind it. This is something serious. My heart rate is pumping a little bit. It seems kind of scary. Okay, so what am I going to do to avoid this scary situation? What do I need to do next? Okay, I got a link to click on, and I also have this PDF to click on. So obviously, these are things that are going to try to bait you into giving out information or downloading something on your system. So, how do we look through this, and what can we look for? Obviously, we have the three components to it. There's trusted authority. There's something in here that's going to generate some sense of urgency, and there's some kind of action item in here. And so again, it's a little more vague than maybe the examples I gave you, but again, it's that same type of pattern. We need to get this information quickly to avoid this. But if you look at the email itself, like up in the from area, so this is sent to, if you take a deep breath and look back, you say, well, this is sent to me from security.irs.com. Well, the IRS is a government agency, so they're generally going to use a .gov with any of their communications, not a .com. We were smart enough to do that down here in the link, but .com is kind of a trigger to me saying this doesn't seem quite right. You also look at the sent area, and the sent time is 2:48 a.m. And I don't know a whole lot about the IRS, but I don't think they have a lot of employees that are working at 2:48 a.m. in the morning, even during tax season. So that's an odd time to send something. So that would be a red flag for me as well. The two row in there, undisclosed recipients. That's a big red flag to me. If it's that important and they know who I am, they would generally send it to my account directly, not an undisclosed recipient. They're probably sending this on a mass level. This might be, sent to multiple people and they don't want to show it, but that's again a red flag. The fraudulent tax filing. This is something new to me. I don't remember any communications around this before. So if it's a new topic or something you don't recognize, that would kind of give me a little bit of pause to think about. Well, maybe this isn't real. So there's some examples of where you could look on the URL itself. On a live email, you can actually hover over it, and it'll show you where that actual URL link is going. And if it's different than what's being displayed, that sometimes can tip you off. And sometimes even the PDF, if you hover over it, occasionally you can see what the file type is, and if it's different than a PDF. I would not recommend clicking on them at all just to discover where it goes. Again, that's where the payload gets delivered, but those are just triggers you might want to look at just to see. And same thing with the from. You could hover over that, or you could right click on it and look for properties, and that'll show you actually where the real email address is. And again, if it's suspect, you don't want to mess with it. But again, if you want to get a little bit more information, slow down, take a look at that stuff. So that's kind of, again, an example of red flags. And we actually have a poster you can get from us. If you want to, you can email us and we'll send you a poster of this for your future use. And I'm going to go through a couple quick real life examples. Here's one right here. again, I showed you the IRS one. This is ADP. So I didn't talk about it, but again, another trusted resource. If you have a big payroll vendor that you're working with, this one comes from, Workforce ADP, and it's weird because, it comes from a Hotmail account. Well, that doesn't seem quite right. Undisclosed recipients, again, another big red flag, but it's a trusted authority, important information, and then some action item, right? So yeah, I know these guys. I got to act urgently. This is an urgent situation because it's very important. And guess what? It's asking about, click here for your W-2 information. So it's probably going to ask you for your password once you click on that, so the hackers can get into your ADP system and get all the stuff they want. The one to the right, again, this is a CEO one. This is real life examples. This one comes through and says, it's sent to the accounting department. It has some kind of third-party name associated with it in the CC column. This one's pretty good. And it appears to be coming from Mr. Smith, who's the CEO of this company, and he is asking for W-2 tax documents to be sent to this third-party consultant. Obviously there's some kind of sense of urgency, and it even says I need this immediately. We're under a time crunch, so this is important. I want to please my boss. I'm going to get this to him as quickly as possible. So again, this is a big one. This is where you'd want to pick up the phone and call the CEO or their assistant and verify before you send anything off. I've even seen these where they say, I don't have time to talk about it. I'm jumping on a plane. Just get this to me now. So they're smart enough to try to combat these verification efforts. But again, another real life example that's out there in the wild. Again, QuickBooks. This is a good one where they're asking, for a credit card being declined. Click here to, get your account all up to date. Even a support page click. This one looks like it's coming from Intuit, but it's actually not. So again, these are things that you want to verify. But again, if you see these three things, I would probably not go on to their recommended website. I would type it in from a fresh Google search, or if you have the URL saved in your web browser, I'd always suggest doing that before you click on something. And then this last one here on the right, it's just a different permutation of it. So again, it doesn't have to come in via your email. If you go back to the original definition, it just said kind of by digital means. So they are, hackers are obviously doing what's called phishing. So they're using voice services now to solicit this information as well. So you might see something on your cell phone that pops up asking for Social Security, again, W-2 stuff. It usually is coming from an unknown number, but they'll try to make it look like it's coming from a similar area code or prefix, just to try to make it look a little bit more of a trusted authority. But it won't. They haven't got to the point yet where it's sophisticated, where it looks like it's coming from your boss. Although I would expect to see that coming here in the near future. So a lot of scary stuff. We've given you some information about how to identify these types of attacks, because obviously they're going to be targeting you as executives, whether you're the owner of the company or working in the HR finance department or another executive role. So we've got some ideas on how to spot these things and not fall for it. And then I want to talk about some actual measures that should be in place. And these aren't all technical measures, but these are the things that really help reduce the risk of falling for it. And if you talk to any cybersecurity expert, they will tell you that your weakest point in your network are the users. And that's why hackers are really focusing more on these types of scams than anything else, because as I mentioned originally, they work. So the best way you can help combat that particular vulnerability is to train your users. And you could, cybersecurity awareness training is probably, the #1 thing you can do. So similar to what this training is, there's plenty of platforms out there that would give some education, and it's got to be recurring education. It's not a one and done, but you want to have ongoing, maybe quarterly security awareness training for your users, because it does take them a while to absorb the information, and they need to become aware of this on an ongoing basis. So again, that reinforcement training is important. You could even run phishing simulations. A lot of these tools also have fake phishing scams that get sent out. So I would much rather have my staff click on a simulated attack that we can address and give them reinforcement training, rather than clicking on the real ones. So again, the more you can do around training and awareness with your team, the better they're going to be at spotting these things when they actually come in for real. The second one is a dark web scanning, and that's kind of one of these things that I think more people are starting to understand and see advertisements for. But this obviously is a monitoring tool that goes out on the dark web where this information is sold by hackers, and it's looking for your information, your passwords, your credentials. It's also looking for personal information out there, and it'll report back to you, so you know if you see something that's out there, you know to change all your passwords and what they're related to. Common ones that come up, LinkedIn had every single password hacked at one point. Yahoo Mail had every single password hacked, and those are things that showed up on these dark web scans. So you know, oh geez, you know, not only should I change my LinkedIn password, but if I use that same password for my company credentials, which I wouldn't recommend doing ever, but if you do, you want to change that as well, because they'll do the research. If they have your LinkedIn, they know where you work. They're gonna test it to say, hey, Jane Doe uses this password to get into LinkedIn. I wonder if Jane Doe uses that same password to get into her corporate network. Second, MFA is a tool, or 2FA, it's also known as, where you have a code that prompts to your phone either via text or an application. In addition to using passwords, is a great way to thwart hackers from getting in from a variety of different attacks. Putting on system patches regularly, making sure that your systems are patched on a regular basis is always important. Web filtering, and it's not just to block people from going to sites you may not want them to for productivity reasons, but it's also there to block these malicious sites. So if you get an email and you click on a link, a lot of times these web filtering tools actually will block that connection. So that's another layer of protection that's very popular and effective. Using proper antivirus and up-to-date antivirus and spam filtering tools is crucial. Disabling unneeded services in your email platform, and one example of that would be if you have Office 365, there's a feature in there where you could forward it to outside accounts like your Gmail account, and that's a very effective way for hackers to use a sophisticated phishing scam. So you want to make sure that whatever email platform you have, you're using best practices to limit the amount of services that can be used against you in these attacks. And then a couple of non-technical things, verification policies for things like wire transfers or releases of sensitive data, I'd always highly recommend. Just even for instance, we have two separate accounts. We've got a regular business checking account, but we also have a separate account that we use just for wire transfers, and it usually has a zero balance. And we have a verification process that has to go through two. It has to be signed off on one of the owners before the wire transfer happens, and we will only move over the amount of money to that transfer account that's supposed to be done. So it limits our exposure if that account, for whatever reason, gets released out in the wild. But there's also that control in there to make sure we don't release any money without one of the owners signing off on it. So again, it's pausing, right? It's usually some kind of urgent matter that needs to happen, but we have checks and balances on that we go through before that actually happens. And then finally, I can't recommend enough, we are not insurance brokers, but having cyber insurance is an absolute must. I don't care what industry you're in anymore. You could be in marketing, advertising, landscaping, finance. You know, it's an absolute must because it's not only your information and your business disruption that can happen, but if you have client data and you've got some big clients out there and that data gets out, it's not supposed to get out, you can get into some really hot water really quick. And we're seeing a lot of our clients, their clients are asking them for cyber insurance as part of their due diligence. So again, these are great things to help prevent phishing attacks from happening in the first place. And hopefully you can pick, you know, I would suggest you, if you don't have any of these, you kind of pick and choose, and we can give you some guidance on which ones you might want to start with. But really, it's a holistic approach. It's not a single shot fixes everything. These are very sophisticated attacks, so you kind of need a sophisticated process and platform to thwart these attacks in the first place. So got a couple questions here. First one is, what should I do if I click on a link or submit information? Really, the best thing to do is notify IT support immediately. They'll probably go through and do a little due diligence on that email, try to figure out where it came from, legitimacy of it. They'll probably run some scans on your system and the network to make sure that maybe something wasn't downloaded that shouldn't have been, and obviously look to change your passwords. But just to keep things simple, if you have a suspect. You have a suspect email that came in that you're not sure about, or if you've clicked on something that didn't seem right, I would always contact support immediately. Again, as I mentioned, you might click on something and nothing happens to your system, but that might be the start of a later attack, and you don't want to be the focal point down the road when they go through the investigation of how this happened. So contact IT support. How do you know if you have proper antivirus? Great question. The antivirus tools have evolved over the years. If you have a legacy program on there, it's probably not as effective as it should be. Generally, what we're looking for now is some kind of product that says next generation. That might do something like heuristic modeling, is another kind of coined phrase in the industry that you hear. But you want to make sure that you're not using something from 2015, for instance. That's something that's updated, or if you have a vendor that you work with, you might ask what their most recent product is. It might have some other components that your legacy product doesn't have. Again, we're looking at this from a holistic approach, and something like your antivirus might also have some of this web filtering capabilities in there, so you might want to take advantage of those. But usually you want to start with the vendor on that. But that looks like all the questions. Let's see. Hold on one second here. I got one more here. Looks like Eileen, you have a question? I'll see if I can get you on voice here. Oh, looks like I can't get you on here. But Eileen, I'll definitely. Oh, you there? I got you. Success. Sorry about that.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I couldn't figure out how to submit a question.
That's quite all right.
Yeah, so I'm just asking, who and where are these scammers? Do they ever get caught? And what do you do when you get an email? Is there somewhere to report them? Like our company just tells us, delete the email, take a screenshot of it and send it to the boss, but we don't do anything else. But that's my
right. Great question. So again, this is the hacking has evolved tremendously over the years. Your first question is kind of where do they come from? Who's doing this? Do they get caught? And it's really a plethora of different sources. It's evolved now to government agencies. So a lot of attacks come from China and Russia, and these are literally, office buildings full of full-time hackers looking to extort money. Obviously, terrorist groups are very effective at doing that as well. So, there's the folks that are government-backed. There's the terrorist groups. It's now even evolved where you can go out on the web and you can actually buy a hacker franchise just like you would buy a Subway franchise, which is a pretty scary intent, but they will give you all the tools on how to execute these attacks. They will give you how-to guides. They will give you these lists that I mentioned on the dark web of here's here's 1,000 passwords you can use, or 1,000 social security numbers, and this is how you can do it. And in return, you're going to pay us a percentage of that in Bitcoin. So it's really it's a massive business now, and it just keeps exponentially growing. So, it's a variety of different sources, very tough to track down. What'll happen is they'll disrupt a particular group and there are arrests made, but more often than not, it's an international issue, so it's very tough for them to prosecute across international lines. It's tough to track them. It's tough to coordinate through the different agencies. And again, sometimes these are government agencies that you're kind of going against. So unfortunately, there's probably less cases of people getting caught than there could be. But again, it's here to stay. I don't really see it changing much in the near future. In terms of, you can submit usually to the FBI, and I can put this up in an email afterwards, but there are the FBI is usually the general place where you'd want to submit this information, and they'll take a hard look at it. I think one of my statistics in the original part of the slideshow was the FBI, but they tend to be the central source of reporting to this. The IRS also has a link on their site where you could report something specific to an IRS scam. And then again, the vendors as well. The vendors want to know about it. So if you have TurboTax, for instance, you might want to notify them. But generally, the IRS and the FBI are your best two points to report these things, besides obviously your IT department. And just a side note, if you do ever get hacked and you're making several phone calls, you're probably making number one to your insurance company, number two, your attorney, and probably number three, you're going to be contacting the FBI, and they've got some resources for you too if that unfortunate incident occurs. Any other questions? Okay, I know we're a little bit over time here. Again, we are here for you. As I mentioned, we've been working in the space for 20 years now, and if you have any doubts about your security posture, we offer a free cybersecurity assessment to kind of assess what tools and measures you have in place to thwart these types of attacks, and be more than happy to sit down with you, do that assessment, and give you some information on how we can get you on the right track. And again, just maybe peace of mind. Maybe you already have everything in place, but you have an expert looking at it from the outside. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us. I got the phone number on there, 800-955-0231. You can contact us at sales@TEKConn.com, or you can always find us on the web at TEKConn.com. So again, thanks everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on one of our future webinars. Take care.